We are going to follow the money.
Everything you need to know can be understood with this simple phrase: follow the money. And believe me, that's what's happened.
Here comes the money.
Here we go. Money talk.
Here comes the money.
Welcome to College Sports Follow the Money, an all-new podcast diving into the critical issues surrounding the big business of college sports. I'm Andrew Monaco, joined by former president of Texas A&M University and former chancellor at the University of Missouri, Dr. Bowen Loftin, and former vice president and general manager of Fox Sports Southwest, Jon Heidtke. From NIL to the transfer portal and opt-outs to the college football playoff, conference realignment, and more, we tackle the key issues facing college athletics today and into the future.
I need to feel you, Jerry! Show me the money! Jerry, you better yell! Show me the money! Show me the money! You love this black man!
We welcome you inside another edition of College Sports Follow the Money, episode number 52 with Dr. Bowen Loftin, with Jon Heidtke. I'm Andrew Monaco. We teased about talking about the bowls. There are a lot of them, but there are some that are more prestigious than others. First and foremost, Dr. Loftin, howdy. Jon Heidtke, howdy, you guys.
Howdy, Andrew.
We have known Michael Konradi for a while. I think one of those prestigious bowls is the Cotton Bowl, chief marketing officer, and he's been involved in that bowl, now the Goodyear Cotton Bowl, since 2001. And what I find interesting about that bowl is it's not just a bowl, if I'm talking to regular fans, to have a piece, I believe it's every 3 years, of a national semifinal, to have a championship game, where it has positioned itself and its reputation. It's one of the best bowls in the land, is it not?
Amen to that. I've been blessed to have been there many times as a fan and as a member of the entourage accompanying a team there as well. So I've seen different aspects of it over the years.
You know, I was on their board for a while when I was at Fox up in Dallas, and we had some issues moving from the Cotton Bowl to the AT&T Stadium. And if you may remember, we weren't in the Final Four of the New Year's original. To get into that six was a big step, and watching the city come together with the new stadium, and so many of the board members had the history tied to the historic Cotton Bowl in Fair Park. How do we get them to all come together? And I think, again, ultimately with the leadership there, they got that one right. And now to your point, it may be one of the bowls. If you're not playing the national championship game and you put truth serum in most of the ADs and presidents, they're going to want to go to the Cotton Bowl because of, again, its legendary hospitality status.
There's that, and there's a former coach that I worked with, always loved it was in an NFL stadium, and said, one, if you want to play in a semifinal or you want to play in a championship, you come here. Two, when you want to play in the league, this is another building you come to. Yeah,
absolutely. So, and again, with all this craziness that's going on, I mean, the bowls are not being left out of this vortex either. So it'll be great to get Michael's insight onto what's going on and what their future might hold for them.
And we are very pleased to be joined by Michael Konradi, the Chief Marketing Officer of the Goodyear Cotton Bowl Classic.
Michael Konradi, the Chief Marketing Officer of the Goodyear's Cotton Bowl, I believe is probably the correct pronunciation there, or your title these days. But Michael and I go way back from my days at Fox Sports, even to HSE, and when he was at the Cotton Bowl, and we've had a long history together over the years and have become good friends. And I don't know of anyone better who can help us kind of decipher some of the collegiate bowl game conversations and what the future might look than this man, because he is certainly the guru and czar of all things in the college bowl world.
Well, hey, first of all, longtime listener of this podcast. So to be on the podcast, I consider this a real thrill. So thanks to you all for having me on. It's great to see you both. And needless to say, there's plenty to talk about right now. So, this could be a 24-hour podcast if we wanted it to be.
That's okay. We'll try to jump to the chase here. Just 41 bowls, right? That's the count right now. Is that the number I'm hearing everywhere? It's correct?
So that is correct, and needless to say, it's big business for ESPN primarily. There's a few other networks that have bowl games, but bowl mania and bowl season is upon us, and if you look at it for ESPN specifically, bowl season is one of their highest rated, programming throughout the year. They average over 2 million viewers per bowl game. And so, middle of December all the way through early part of January, there'll be a good college football game every night. And so, the market dictates, and as such, we've got 41 bowl games.
Incredible. Michael, can you give me a little bit of a tutorial on the economics of a bowl? I mean, I know they're not all the same. The Cotton Bowl is certainly at the top of the heap in terms of how they've worked in the past or work in the future. But I'm just curious about the economics of it. Ticket sales versus sponsorships. How does it all work?
Yeah, great question. Well, first of all, there are differences between certain bowl games. You have a lot of the older tried and true bowl games like the Cotton Bowl are considered nonprofits. We're a 501c3, of which most of the money that we make obviously goes back to higher education, goes back to the participating teams in a manner. A little bit more complex now in the college football playoff era. But some are made-for-profit organizations. There's quite a few. I believe there's 17 bowl games now that are owned and operated by ESPN that look at it as an extension of their programming, right? And so, a little bit different from bowl game to bowl game, but certainly in our case, 50% of our revenue comes from ticket sales. And so, the strong season ticket base that we enjoy here at AT&T Stadium is critical to our success. And so luckily we've been able to sell out every year since we've moved to AT&T Stadium. And that has, put us on real sound financial ground as we move forward, and has allowed us to elevate ourselves, in all honesty, to the college football playoff level that we are now. And then you look at other revenue streams, certainly sponsorships being the next, large bucket of revenue that we have to work from. It's a little bit complex in the college football playoff ranks. To be a member of the college football playoff, in all honesty, we take our television rights and our title sponsorship rights, and we bundle that, and that's what we give to the college football playoff to be a part of. And in return, that's what the CFP is bundling and selling to ESPN. So at the end of the day, that's what ESPN is buying. And then ESPN actually sold through our title sponsorship, to Goodyear now 10 years ago. And then Goodyear then comes in and does a smaller sponsorship deal with the Cotton Bowl to do all of the activation in and around our game. So really what Goodyear is doing is they're buying a large media buy package of sorts with ESPN that incorporates television opportunities throughout the entirety of the football season. Well, now that it's, obviously Disney, it's much broader than that. Disney's selling in cruise ships and theme parks and everything else they can as part of, but it's a huge media buy. And if you look at it, if you believe what you read, specifically to the New Year's Six title sponsors, each title sponsor is spending somewhere in the range of $15 to $20 million a year for the media buy. And then they come in and do, again, that lesser deal with each of the bowl games to activate on site in the stadium, around the stadium, at our events throughout the year. So that's how our model works ultimately. But again, some of the other bowl games like the Alamo Bowl or the Texas Bowl, they are negotiating television rights, directly with their television partner and garnering that as a revenue stream. So for us, that used to be a major revenue stream for us, but technically that goes to the college football playoff.
Things do change, don't they?
Things do change, and they're about to change again. Obviously with the expansion next year, and I know we'll dive into that, but inevitably we've been on one network now since the advent of the CFP, and there's certainly lots of discussion as to what that's going to look like moving forward, and whether or not it's going to be a spread across 2 networks or potentially 3 networks, even maybe certainly a streaming service as a possibility to jump in and be a part of the college football playoff landscape. A lot to potentially occur within the next year, in all honesty, as far as taking the financial terms and going out to bid. I would expect that the CFP will have to do that, knowing that there's really only 2 more years left on our overall contract after this year's game, in the current context of the college football playoff.
Have you had a chance to meet the new executive director, Michael?
I have not, no, and unfortunately, many of us don't know much about him. I mean, obviously, an amazing resume, but no, and he doesn't officially start, my understanding, until June. He's finishing up his term, going through the school year at the Air Force Academy before he comes on board to run the college football playoff. I expect we'll see him in Houston, certainly. And that'll be probably the first opportunity for most of us to have a chance to meet him. But, certainly I've heard great things by so many people as it relates to, but, he played in a bowl game at Air Force Academy back in the day. So that I think that's good that he's got that understanding, but, I'm sure there'll be a pretty good learning curve for him, getting a strong understanding of the college football playoff landscape.
One thing, Michael, you've had a chance to see it, and I think to date that the college football and the bowl games have worked very well together to kind of formulate this playoff system and get us to where we are today. And over time there was some little gnashing of teeth back in the day. You remember when those conversations were going, and the Cotton Bowl elevating itself to get into the New Year's Six at that process wasn't a foregone conclusion back in the day. And hats off to you and the rest of your staff for getting that done. But it does seem like as we move into this new realm, there's probably a few more questions that are going to be answered than going into sort of to the 4-team playoff that was developed. As you guys kind of sit around a room and strategize for the future, what are some things that you would like to see potentially evolve as we move into this new era?
Yeah, that's a great question, John. And in all honesty, I think the answer to that question will evolve over the coming months as we learn more about what that system is going to look like. I will tell you that, one of our primary goals as we move forward is still to provide the best experience possible for the student athlete. We wouldn't be talking right now if it wasn't for the players and, the great seasons they've had to be able to get to the Goodyear Cotton Bowl Classic. This year, obviously, we have Ohio State and Missouri in our game, and both teams deserve to be recognized for an incredible season. So moving forward, even though within the realm of a 12-team playoff, these games are going to be business trips for these players. It's still going to be incumbent upon us to create experiences that last a lifetime. So we want to make sure that we hold on to that identity of doing just that, as we've done now for 87 going on 88 years. So what can we do to make sure that we find that balance between prepping for the game and letting them focus on the task at hand of advancing, on in the playoff, and providing the best experience. So you also look into that and say, all right, so knowing that, this year, for example, the teams are arriving on December 23rd and the game is on Friday, December 29th. So the teams are here for a whole week, chock full of activities, as both of you know, having been to many a bowl game, throughout the entirety of the week. Well, moving forward, next year, we're the semifinal. And as a member of the semifinal, the teams will come in for 2 nights, 3 days. So Cotton Bowl week gets condensed down to Cotton Bowl weekend, if you will. And so you think about all those ancillary events that we've done for all these many years. We're going to have to really reimagine the experience for not only the teams, but for the fans and everybody involved, which is exciting. I actually look at it as a great challenge, for our organization to try to figure out what that looks like and how it's going to impact us financially. I mean, we'll save some money in some areas, we'll spend more money in other areas. But ultimately, the idea is to still provide the very best experience for the teams first, certainly the fans. AT&T Stadium is such a phenomenal backdrop for our game, and really was the last component we needed to elevate the Cotton Bowl to the playoff. So I'm not sure I really answered your question well, John. I mean, as we move forward, we're learning about what all of the changes are going to mean and how they're going to affect us. So my answer today may change tomorrow based on the details that are still being worked out. And that's the difficult nature, right? The main folks that are trying to figure this all out are commissioners and university presidents, the board of governors. And needless to say, they've got a lot of fish to fry right now. They're trying to work through everything from conference realignment to NIL, the transfer portal. I don't envy them right now just because of the amount of work that they have to do. And you look at the industry as a whole right now, and a lot of the old guard, guys are getting out of the business. They're retiring, and you've got this new band of leaders coming into college athletics that are trying to figure it out. And obviously, the announcement this week of the NCAA and what they're looking to do moving forward, or at least start the conversation as we move forward, what that ultimately ends up looking like, and how that's going to impact Division I, if you will, athletics, and certainly the bowl games is yet to be seen.
Michael, to give you a little bit of a chance to breathe here, perspective. My first bowl game, as a fan, obviously, was January 1, 1968, in the Cotton Bowl, the old Cotton Bowl. It was a cold day in Dallas, sir, a cold day in Dallas, and I was in the top row, all I could afford, and shivering. My teeth chattered the entire game to watch Texas A&M take on number 3 Alabama and win that game. And I watched coaches come together. Coach Bryant stomped across the field at the end of the game, picked up Coach Dean Stallings, and that was an incredible thing to watch. My teeth quit chattering when that happened anyway. But fast forward, now, of course, I went through a lot of bowl games in my official roles at universities. In fact, looking at my shelf here, I've got, I think, 14 or 15 watches, sir, sitting here. And that's one question: is will we still see watches as gifts to the players and the other et ceteras at these games here as we go forward?
Well, the first of all, you go back to that 68 game. Coach Stallings and coming out to midfield with Bear Bryant, and as the famous story goes, right, where Coach Bryant was his coach when Gene played for A&M, and it's one of the famous pictures in college football of Bear Bryant picking up Gene Stallings, and it's we call it the bear hug picture, and we love to hear stories about that 68 team, and ultimately. Quite a few of those, including Coach Stallings, have been inducted into our Hall of Fame. But that was a huge moment for in the history of Texas A&M football. I know it's been outlined, I think, in the exhibition that's going on at the Presidential Library right now. So, but going back to your question, Dr. Loftin, the watch, there's a great story there in the sense that back in the 60s and 70s, we actually used to give out Rolexes to the players. And back then, Rolex was just another brand. Nobody really knew what Rolex was. And inevitably, those have become highly collectible. The NCAA obviously instituted some rules that forbid bowls from giving out gifts of that stature. I think our amount we're allowed to give out and value to each student athlete currently is somewhere in the realm of $550 per student athlete. So, it's something we take great pride in and coming up with kind of a great package. But $550 a few years ago was a big deal to a student athlete. But in this day and age of name, image, and likeness, and the amount of money that folks are making now, $550 is a nice tip.
They'll be giving you a Rolex.
Yeah. We need to bring the Rolexes back. I mean, if you can do NIL, let us bring the Rolex back. And there's just so many great stories. You find players of that era that still. Ed Hargett just went into our Hall of Fame. He still wears his Rolex from the '68 Cotton Bowl. And there's a great story about a player out of Tennessee who, shortly after the game, lost his watch in the ocean. He was fishing, in shallow water and caught his net on his watch, dropped his watch, lost it. But 50 years later, somebody called him and said, "Hey, I've got your watch," and it washed back up on shore, and somehow, some way, ended up in his hands, and it still worked.
Watches sort of form a iconic piece of bowl history, in my opinion. I got 14, 15 on the shelf here that I've got from the bowls I attended officially.
Go over to Alabama, Mal Moore, legendary coach, athletic director, et cetera, at Alabama, passed away a number of years ago now, but they have a display case set up in their athletic facilities that are all the bowl watches, all the rings that he received over the years, and it's overwhelming. It's an incredible collection. 14 is pretty impressive, though, Dr. Loftin. Not too shabby.
It's just age. It's age, sir.
There you go.
So, Michael, one of the things I think that you look at, I think you and the other New Year's Six bowls right now are probably in pretty good shape when all this stuff shakes out. But when we talk about the other, 30-something bowls out there, do you see in your crystal ball, do you see that changing at all? Anything happening there? Teams wanting to participate in bowl games? I certainly think they do. My sense is that they will, but would love to get, you're probably closer to those kind of discussions. And what's the general consensus when you talk to your brethren in some of those other bowls?
Well, again, the market is there in the sense that people show up certainly to watch bowl games, and in many instances, depending on the matchup, show up in person, and inevitably, you have cities all over the country that want to host these. You look at a game like the New Mexico Bowl, it is a 3-hour infomercial for the state of New Mexico, and it is the only nationally televised sporting event in the state of New Mexico for the entirety of the year. And so for that community, that's an important endeavor. And so they're going to do whatever they can to try to keep those games going, obviously. That's not to say, John, I mean, the challenges are there. And obviously it starts with players opting out. And that obviously became a thing. I think it became more streamlined with Christian McCaffrey. He was the first big player that opted out, where everybody's like, wait a second, you can do this? And then inevitably, it's you see that happen now for most bowl games. So yes, to the point that you made, moving forward for us specifically with the college football playoff, when you're playing for a national championship, the odds of a player opting out go away. So we're excited about that specific to our game. For these other bowl games, there's going to be some adjustments, and I know behind the scenes that there's a lot of folks that are working to figure out, all right, how could this work? If you see a scenario where a number of players are opting out for prep for NFL draft or whatever it may be, transfer portal, obviously has got a huge impact. One of the things I know that's been discussed is the possibility of lifting the redshirt status for bowl games. So at least you've got the bodies to play, right? That these players may have been redshirted for the season, but ultimately the bowl game may not count towards that to where they would have the ability to play. So that's one thing I know they're looking at. Inevitably, I know there's been discussion too about trying to tie the bowls to the NIL deals inevitably. So, what is, if a player is to accept, an NIL deal, the entirety of the season includes the bowl game. So if you're going to get money, you got to play in the bowl game. And so, that's something that I know, behind the scenes, again, is something that's being discussed, is how within the framework of NIL can it be worked out with the players. There's obviously levels even underneath the New Year's Six games where, if you have a matchup between the SEC and the Big Ten, that's where the real struggle is moving forward and trying to figure out, all right, Texas A&M certainly has had a lot of opt-outs before they're prepping now to go to the Texas Bowl. And so, how does that affect A&M overall? And so the Texas Bowl, obviously, it's something that really worries them. But then there's another tier of bowl game, if you will, that's got the likes of, Central Michigan playing, South Alabama. Well, those players are just elated to be there and ultimately to have that opportunity. And so I will tell you that there's a market for certainly that level of bowl game where those teams have a place to go and be rewarded at the end of the season. It's more the Power 5 teams, if you will, the Power 4, I guess, moving forward, ultimately that will that are going to create the biggest struggle for those bowl games that have those direct affiliations with those conferences, that they're going to have to try to work through and partner with the conferences to come up with a solution that allows for a decent product to be put on the field that people want to tune into. And, again, bowls are a huge revenue stream for each of these individual conferences. So the conferences certainly are wanting to be a part of the solution as well.
Well, Michael, do you see an issue? I mean, every year I'm seeing a small number, at least, of teams that don't make the six wins, that there is a discussion about where they need to go, if anywhere. And sometimes they get admitted to a bowl game with 5 wins and an academic sort of piece of it that's used to give them the nod to go do that. Do you see that as a thing that can be worked with a bit? Is 6 going to be the magic number forever? Are we going to have this sort of beginning of this creep in from the other side based on other kinds of standards?
Dr. Loftin, that's a great question. Not only from the standpoint of, the market will dictate, and ultimately, if depending on the structure, obviously, of Division I moving forward, and obviously what's been put forth by the NCAA most recently as a proposal will really change things. But at the end of the day, right now, I believe we had to have 82 teams get to 6 wins. We had 81. And so Minnesota, based on their academics and their GPA as a team, got in with the 5 and 7 to fill the 82 slots. And so moving forward, and that's fluctuated a little bit. Sometimes it's more teams at 5 and 7, and sometimes it's none. Certainly my personal opinion, and I probably don't speak for all the bowl games by any stretch in saying this, is that, bowl games should be a reward for a great season. And so, finishing under 500, I don't know if that constitutes that. And so inevitably that's the struggle. And if you are a fan of college football and you've been watching bowls for decades, the concept of a 5 and 7 team going to a bowl game, when back in the day, and not so very long ago in the grand scheme of things, the Cotton Bowl was one of 11 bowl games on New Year's Day and around New Year's Day, and it was a huge deal if you made it to the Cotton Bowl as Southwest Conference champions. And so, there's certainly a contingent that say there's too many bowl games, but again, I'll go back to what the market dictates, and as long as people are tuning into these games, and they are in droves, that there's a market. And ESPN and Fox and CBS will continue to televise as long as that's there. So, what it looks like, honestly, with the expanded playoff, the number of teams that access the bowls, if you will, really doesn't change. Because if you look at the expanded playoff, what happens is, those New Year's 6 bowl games right now, you use us as the example. We host a semifinal in the current context of the 14 playoff. We host a semifinal once every 3 years. And in the years that we're not hosting a semifinal, we get an at-large top 10 matchup, just like this year. We've got number 7 playing number 9 in the Cotton Bowl, but it's at large. We'll move forward. That game is a quarterfinal. And so what that means is that, next year, the Cotton and the Orange host the semifinals. The Peach, Fiesta, Sugar, and Rose will host the quarterfinals. So the number of teams, technically, even though the playoff expands, but the number of teams in bowl games remains the same. And so, and then the trickle down from there. Now, the power of perception is what's going to be really interesting to see. And the perception is, if you're not in the playoff, have you had a great season? And again, I'll make the argument for a certain level of teams. Absolutely, they're to be commended, and they'll do that. But there's also going to be disappointment, and you see it this year. Our friends in Miami right now, obviously with Florida State and Georgia in their game, are having to deal with a lot, I'm sure, as it relates to unhappy fans. And, for schools like Alabama and Georgia, to a degree, Michigan, Ohio State, those blue blood programs, it's playoff or bust in their minds. And that's the power of perception that bowls are going to have to fight and come up with ways to continue to tell the story about all the good that bowl games do, which is a lot, and it's more than just a game.
And ESPN, your television partners, do a pretty good job on too of that, I think, Michael. They understand the importance of this. And to your point is, one of the reasons ESPN's have so heavily involved in this is great content for them, during this month, and they're able to package that in a period, and it really fits their, that year-end advertising sponsorship schedule as well. So I don't see the numbers decreasing at all, probably, when this is all said and done. I do think there probably need to be some more parameters about what qualifies and what constitutes you getting into a game. But I think, again, and now with ESPN, the streamer services that you've talked about, if I'm one of the players and I get involved in the CFP process, I'm going to want to have some additional bowl games to help lead me up to that point, to use that as a promotional platform as well. So I think it's going to be, I don't think we're going to see less. I just think it's going to be, how do you manage the process? And to some of the points that you brought up, some of these schools. LSU was at a couple of years ago. They didn't have a team, right, going to the Texas Bowl till the day of the game. So you got to fight through some of that stuff too. So it'll be interesting to see how the industry, and I think you guys are very thoughtful about the process and certainly have your heart in it for the right place for college athletics, particularly college football. That I think, again, that hopefully you'll have a good seat at the table to help maybe answer and solve some of those questions going forward.
Yeah, no, I'm spot on, John. And I will tell you too that those that are nonprofits that have been around forever and those that are for profits, I think there's going to be some discussion amongst certain bowl games that have been nonprofits forever to say, all right, does this business model still work for us moving forward? And ultimately, do we need to have a partner like ESPN and become more of a for-profit structure in order to thrive in the future? And so if you look at that number of 17 bowl games that ESPN has now, didn't start out that way. That number has grown. And, there's also creative partnerships where, it's using the Texas Bowl, for example, it's a kind of a joint partnership, if you will, between the Houston Texans and ESPN in regards to ownership of that game and how that works. So I think moving forward, there's going to be some shifts in the dynamics of how bowl games are owned or run that you could see because of the expanded playoff. Andrew, it's good to see you.
Good to see you, Michael.
How you been?
I've been good, my friend. Very good. I'm so glad you're able to join those two.
It's great to be on with you.
You're very kind.
So Andrew, you've been on at least listening for a bit here. You have any particularly perceptive questions to ask, Michael?
I have no idea if they're any perceptive, but Michael, my whole thing, first time I hear Cotton Bowl, how proud are you that it's one of the most well-received teams? Can't wait to get there. Teams are spoiled while they are there. Not every bowl is like that, Michael. Cotton Bowl absolutely stands out because of that.
Well, first of all, I appreciate you saying that. That is something that has taken decades to build a brand, and it starts at the top. I mean, if you look at it, certainly our president, Rick Baker, has been around since Troy Aikman played in the game, 1989, and he's created a culture here that is all about hospitality first and customer service and providing the very best. And really our philosophy is, and it starts at the top, we try not to be all things to all people, pick a few things and do them to the very best of our ability and try to get just a little bit better every year. And when you're in business for 88 years, that's a challenge. So, we take great pride in what we do and how we do it. And honestly, our volunteer leadership, Dave Brown, a good Aggie, who runs American Airlines Center, is chair of the Cotton Bowl right now. He's going into his second year of a 2-year term. And so we've had some phenomenal leaders over the years. Fred McClure, Tommy Bain. We've had our fair share of Aggies at the helm. Mike Baggett, going back to 68, yell leader in that 68 game, Dr. Loftin. And so we've had some remarkable Aggies at the helm of the Cotton Bowl over the many years. But just the volunteer leadership has been really a difference maker for us too, and the support that we've gotten here in North Texas and beyond. And it just only grows. Since we moved to AT&T Stadium, we technically are in Tarrant County now. So, we're closer to Fort Worth than we are Dallas. And as such, our board has grown. We have 90 board members for the Cotton Bowl. And we have an executive committee that really meets monthly that does the bulk of the heavy lifting in regards to day-to-day important decisions. And then our board meets 3 times a year. So, Andrew, to your point, it takes this army of folks, volunteers, volunteer leadership, our staff, which is phenomenal. We have roughly 10 full-time staff members, and then a handful of what we call permanent part-time staff members that come in and work to put on all of the events around the game and make them successful. And if you look at the continuity that Rick has created, where most of our staff has been here a long time. I've been here. This is my 22nd game going into, and as such, that's a testament to what Rick has created, and that certainly helps. And the other aspect too is, we don't have Bourbon Street, we don't have South Beach here in North Texas, so we have to go create our hospitality, and we take great pride in that, and it's a lot of fun. in all honesty, and you all have experienced it. And so, sometimes in those other cities, it's not to say they don't do great events, they do, but they also have the ability to say, hey, there's Bourbon Street, go have fun. Whereas we really take pride in our hospitality rooms and what we create for the teams and the VIPs at the hotels. That it's our signature element, and it's really our difference maker.
One more thing, Michael, how proud are you that to volunteer for students, to volunteer at the Cotton Bowl? John, you know this, sport management students will do this, and I know Texas A&M has a lot go in there. How valuable, one, is that? Two, how proud are you when you see some of those volunteers then get into different roles, whether it's in or out of sports?
Yeah, needless to say, that program that we've been doing for well over a decade now with the sports management program at Texas A&M, where we have 12 students, 8 of them undergrad, 4 of them grad students, that come in and work the entirety of Cotton Bowl week and learn about what it takes to put on a major event. And they get course credit for it. I wish that program existed when I was in school. But it's a remarkable opportunity for them to learn. And I will tell you that they are now very much a key part of our operation to help us with some of our major events, grassroots marketing they do for us on the front end of their arrival. Dr. Shane Hudson is the one that brought us the idea so many years ago, and he's done a phenomenal job of spearheading that program over the years and helping us to put our best foot forward. And it just seems like every year the quality of the students just continues to improve, and I'm excited. December 26th is when they roll in this year, and so now also to see we've done a decent job of creating almost an alumni network within the ranks of the Cotton Bowl A&M students, where we try to keep track of where they go and what they do. And we have, we've got a pretty good group of students that have gone on to do some really impressive things within the realm of sports management, sports leadership, in all honesty. And so that's a program I'm very proud of, and one that I hope continues and thrives for well after I'm gone. And so I'm glad you brought that up.
No surprise about the quality of people you're getting into your team there, from my perspective anyway. We're at 1:45. Michael, I think you had to move out at this point. Is that correct?
I've got a few more minutes if you need,
Okay.
have another question or so, but I am prepping for a call with our friends from Goodyear to get ready for
an important call.
Ready for the game. I have learned more about tires in the last 10 years and the Goodyear blimp than I ever thought I would.
Well, I was going to ask you, have you been in the blimp yet yourself?
I've been twice, actually.
Okay.
I've been,
my dream.
I went in one of the old ones, and I've been in one of the new ones, and they have 3 new ones now. One that's in California, one in Akron, and one in Florida. And interestingly enough, because of the winter weather and the prospect of winter weather, the Goodyear blimp has yet to fly at the Goodyear Cotton Bowl Classic because there's no place to house it. We have looked for empty hangars across North Texas, and it's got to be protected because you never know. I mean, it could be 70 degrees and sunny in Dallas-Fort Worth, and then the next day it could be 30 and sleeting. So we tried valiantly to bring the blimp over at our last semifinal from Florida, and it hit a cold front in New Orleans and had to turn back. So one of these days we're going to get the Goodyear blimp here. But I will say that we have 2 mini Goodyear blimps flying inside the stadium this year at the game. So it's pretty remarkable what Goodyear does on that side with their airships, as they call them, and use them as opportunities to teach. In all honesty, they'll bring students through, and it's great for STEM programs. And then separate from that, I mean, from a branding perspective, it's iconic. I believe actually it was inducted into the College Football Hall of Fame.
Yeah.
I used to work occasionally at Moffett Field out in California, which was the home of a huge fleet of Navy blimps.
Oh, there you go.
These hangars are so big, Michael, there's weather in them. They have thunderstorms can occur inside of the hangar. It's incredible. Yeah, so you need some space, even though the Goodyear blimp's not quite the scale of some of these military blimps of the past, or the Hindenburg. It's still an impressive sight. And I want to see Jon Heidtke hanging off one of those smaller blimps, flying around inside the Cotton Bowl. That'll be a lot of fun, John.
Well, I've got a funny story for Michael, but I think he may know the story. I think when I was 10, the Goodyear blimp was in Austin, Texas, and my dad was taking us out there, and we got caught up in traffic or something. We didn't get to ride it. My dad had a connection. And then it was probably 15 years ago. It was here, I think, whenever Goodyear became the title sponsor. And we got out there, and some kind of burst of weather came up, and we were the last group to go up, and we didn't go up.
Oh, that's right. I forgot about that, John. Yeah, it was like a little Ziggy cloud that came right over you as you were about to get off.
And then the guy said, "Sorry, you guys all got to get off." So I'm going like 40 years. So hopefully I'll make it another. I don't know if I'll make it another 40, but we'll see. But
we'll have to take care of that next time it comes through town. Just one of these days we'll be here for the game. But it comes through Dallas every once in a while.
Yeah.
Well, weather's going to be just right.
One last question for you, and this kind of ties into what I think Charlie Baker was saying the other day. And you've got an intimate knowledge of the sponsorship world here. Now, Goodyear, these sponsors now are getting much more sophisticated in what they want. Charlie Baker even said that during the championships, in his speech in Las Vegas earlier this week, was talking about even as the NCAA championships, they don't know who all their customers are. And as data is becoming such a big, important part of, knowing who your customers, how to market to them, how to utilize that information to move the process forward. What are some of the things that you've seen change in terms of the world of sponsorships you've been involved in, and now how you guys have evolved in that to try to give Goodyear, a world-class opportunity and something that's really going to help them see an ROI on their relationship with y'all?
Yeah, listen, data is king. It drives the bus now. And ultimately, at the end of the day, all sponsors are trying to get in front of as many people as possible. So you have the impressions, the eyeballs, the building the brand that sponsorships look for, obviously. But on the other side, it's how can they get their product or their service in front of a customer? And so inevitably to do that, you've got to capture that data. And so, we're constantly coming up with creative ways to be able to get to people, whether it's capturing their emails, capturing their cell phone information in a manner that hopefully isn't considered over the top, but yet, can allow someone like Goodyear to pass through a tire discount, or Dr. Pepper is our number 2 sponsor to pass through, savings on a 12-pack of Dr. Pepper. So, inevitably it's a real push, if you will, by corporations to say, help us help you in regards to capturing that data. So Goodyear oftentimes will bring a lot of their own resources to do just that, certainly. And a lot of times it can be manufactured in a way where you're signing up for an opportunity to participate in a Goodyear blimp race. That's a virtual blimp race, but by virtue of signing up, they've captured your information and they can push out, Goodyear advertising or Goodyear offers and potentially keep it going for more. So, more and more, it's all about how can you capture that data. And so, like a push this year, in all honesty, is, I can control our season ticket holders. I can control those that have come into AT&T Stadium as a Cotton Bowl season ticket holder, but I'm being tasked to do more in regards to getting to the Ohio State fan base and to the Missouri fan base and see what we can do to get opportunities in front of them to capture their data. So it's a struggle, and especially for a one-off like the Cotton Bowl, right? The Rangers are playing 81 home games a year, so it's a lot easier when you're talking about organizations that have multiple games to be able to capture more content, so more data points, if you will. So we also rely heavily on AT&T Stadium and the Cowboys. So they're big partners, and so very important. Long answer to your short question.
Well, because I think one of the things that if you listen to what Baker's comments were is that if you can take your data and then you marry that up with all of the other bowl games data, and now in a 12-team environment, what does that create for the NCAA to put into the next round of negotiations? With you say data is king, all of a sudden that could become very powerful, currency as you're sitting there negotiating with your television and broadcast partners as well. So I see a lot of value in that, and what you're doing there is certainly going to enhance. That's just another, feather in your cap of creating value for what you bring to the table in those discussions.
No doubt about it. And then again, as we move forward, the television networks are such a huge, huge part of that, right? So to amplify a message, it comes, from television and then beyond that. I mean, ESPN's, role in the digital world between their website, their mobile app, et cetera, is vastly important to brands to get the message out and to be able to capture that data. So it's all encompassing. It's not just about what's going on here at AT&T Stadium. It's about what's going on. How do we get to the person in the living room, watching the game at home, and capturing all that data and sharing it through with the right people. And you're right. When I say content is king, you're going to be able to, people are monetizing off of that data, at a level now that, 10 years from now, I scared to think about what the sheer value of that will be for certain organizations to be able to share through that data.
Yeah. Fascinating stuff, Michael.
Gentlemen, thank you. Thank you for having me on. Really have enjoyed the time with you. Again, as I said at the onset, longtime listener. So it's an honor to be on with you all. Keep up the good work. You've got plenty to talk about just within the college realm alone right now. And needless to say, it's not going to stop for a while.
Cannot thank Michael Konradi enough for joining us. Another reason why we rave about the Cotton Bowl is because of people like Michael. I'm so thrilled that he joined us, and I love getting that insights and a little bit more. And I'm not going to lie, fascinated to hear you three talk. It's so really fun. But our thanks to Michael for that. We continue with our College Sports Follow the Money podcast, and Dr. Loftin, after talking about in this bowl edition, you've got a little bit more for us to talk about.
Well, just a couple of late-breaking kinds of things here I wanted to talk about just briefly, get your reaction to. As we look at the Pac, whatever it is, the Pac 2+ or whatever it might be here going forward.
The Tupac. It's now the Tupac.
Tupac, yeah.
They have announced now that Oregon State will continue their so-called Civil War rivalry beyond this moment in time when they part ways as members of the same conference. And I am hearing the same thing really about Washington and Washington State in their Apple Play, or whatever they called it, Apple Cup thing that they have as well. They have not put the length of time on it that I think Oregon State have at this point, but I expect those rivalries to continue. That's a good thing. I'm glad that for the fans that I like to think myself as primarily, that we're seeing two great rivalries continue in spite of this sort of housekeeping problem of what conference you're actually in. You guys got any reaction to how the Pac is sort of figuring it out right now and what's going to happen with them in the Mountain West?
No, I think they bought themselves some time. So I think that's the best thing they could have at this point, to see what that's going to translate and what it's going to look like. And then, it probably, unless there's another wave of a dramatic shift, I think they'll probably settle into some relationship with some of those schools from the Mountain West and maybe look and see who else would make sense if they want again. I think there's a lot of branding to the Pac-12 name. So I would be surprised if they don't keep that in some fashion or form. But certainly Oregon State and Washington State have bought themselves a little bit more time to pursue the right membership conversations going forward. But certainly those two rivalries are great. And I wish some of the other, I just hate to see the Bedlam series go away. And same thing that happened to A&M in Texas for so many years, getting it back. But hopefully Oklahoma and Oklahoma State can figure out, because for the folks in that state, that's one of the most, from a football standpoint, I mean, it rivals the best of them right up there.
Every once in a while, Pitt plays Penn State, but that one went away when Penn State went into the Big Ten, and now that Pitt is in the ACC, I think they fired it back up for just a couple, but it's gone away again. And I get the Texas A&M one. The thing that always got me, Dr. Loftin, was I felt the other Big 12 schools, after A&M went to the SEC, kind of shot themselves in the foot by not scheduling A&M. That was a guaranteed sellout, if you ask me. And for 13 years, they weren't doing that. It kind of hurt themselves.
Yeah.
Well, Andrew, I agree. I mean, the problem was really ego, especially a certain AD to the west of me. Not an AD anymore, but AD then anyway, made it very clear where he was coming from and didn't worry about that. What I was shocked about, I went to Missouri as chancellor after leaving Texas A&M's presidency. And of course, the same thing happened there as happened in Texas in terms of a classic rivalry between Kansas and Missouri. And so, I actually approached, I went to the chancellor at that time of the University of Kansas. I said, look, Bernadette, I've been talking to my friends in Kansas City. Arrowhead Stadium will be happy to host a neutral site game between Mizzou and Kansas. And by the way, the arena there would be happy to host also a basketball game. I was promised $4 million net apiece for a football game at Arrowhead Stadium and $3 million apiece for a basketball game at the arena in Kansas City if we could come together again. So I'll call you back. She called me back and said, Bill tells me not to do this. So that
really
tells you who was in charge, okay?
Yeah.
Now, over time, that cracks have appeared and things are changing now, obviously, because money does ultimately talk. And following the money is important, as we all know in this particular podcast. But I was just stunned when she told me who was really in charge. It wasn't her as chancellor. It wasn't her AD. It was her basketball coach who was calling the shots. Not a surprise in some respects, knowing his personality and so on, but still, it was something else again. And of course, the AD in Austin was doing the same thing regarding our thing and promising never to play us again. Now, that's not going to be the case going forward, obviously. And we'll see what happens as time goes on with all sports. But we've been playing them in other sports, volleyball, for example, and soccer and things like that for a while now. So I'm hoping things will get back to some degree of the history of a very, very important relationship in terms of sports competition between two great schools in the state of Texas. And we'll see that hopefully in Oregon and Washington, places like that as well going forward.
John, bowl season, right?
Bowl season, one of my favorite times of the year. I remember growing up as a kid, watching it was the cotton, the orange, the sugar, and then Keith Jackson with the granddaddy of them all, the Rose Bowl. So it was that was something as a kid was a treat. Now that I think as a football fan, I do believe in the theory that now starting probably 2 weeks out, 3 weeks out, their bowl games, 30 some odd 40 bowl games when you factor in all of the CFP games. So again, it's a wonderful time for a smorgasbord of those bowl games. And I have a question for you guys. I mean, over the years, you've all seen a lot of bowl games, and you've seen some really kind of unique alignment with sponsors in bowl games over the years. And so I wanted to pose a question to you as we end today's show. What bowl game and sponsor do you kind of sticks out in your head as being something that very hard to forget from that standpoint, or memorable, or just for whatever areas? And if you want me to, I'll start. Because who could ever forget in Shreveport the great Poulan Weed Eater Bowl?
I was going to say that one.
You take your weed whacker out there and go on the AstroTurf trying to clean it up. That didn't quite work, but it was just such a great name. The sponsorship, that was something where you can't necessarily beat that. It's got to be in the all-time Bowl Hall of Fame for sponsors.
That certainly is a sponsor name. Now, my interesting one is simply the Orlando Citrus Bowl that I had the pleasure of being at a couple of times, actually. And the last time I was there was Missouri versus Minnesota. And the trophy is a basket of real fruit. So guess what happened at their presentation? Some of the team guys grabbed some of the fruit and began eating it. It was hilarious.
Having lived in Orlando, we loved the Citrus Bowl when it was still called the Citrus Bowl. And then the earlier one would be the Tangerine Bowl that they used to play prior to Christmas. And having gone to the University of Maryland, I believe there were only 2 Cherry Bowls played in Pontiac in the Silver Dome.
There you go.
Maryland won one of them. I do remember that. So the Cherry Bowl, Poulan Weed Eater. And then I really did not like the time where they took the names off and it was just Sponsor Bowl. For some reason, being as old as I am, I always liked having, whether it was Peach Bowl, it had a little bit of history. That's for sure. But good time of year. Here's my mini rant. My only problem, I love that it's programming for ESPN. My problem becomes every halftime, all they talk about is the Final Four teams and not about the teams in that bowl. So I don't know how many times, 41 times I've got to hear about the semifinal. And if you're not one of those 4 teams, that's just it. It seems to take a little bit of luster, but John, to your point earlier, what these bowls mean to these communities and how the communities and advertisers have embraced. And I don't think it works in any other month but December. In between Thanksgiving and Christmas, I think this really works this time of the year. And that's why so many people tune in and watch. to your other point, I think in the next decade, data will become very, very, very important and will change the way these, I don't know if change the way they operate, but you can really, really tailor these bowls and their sponsorships and the fans.
Yeah, to do that tailored, customized experience for those fans that are there if you're selling tires or weed eaters or whatever. So, but
it's also important to San Antonio and the Alamo Bowl and those fans, because the local fans really make that experience, do they not?
Yeah, they do. I mean, they support it. It's like, again, Michael made a great point tonight about the fact that New Mexico, I never thought of that. That's the only sporting event played that's getting national coverage played in the state of New Mexico is the bowl game up there. So that whole state invests in that process. And I remember a couple of years ago, I'm drawing a blank on the name, but it was a suburb of Chicago that basically says, hey, we're open for business. And they sponsored a bowl game for that 3-hour commercial to try to get new businesses to sort of think of the Chicago suburb as a place to go. So again, it's people want to watch sports, kind of they're winded down, it's the holiday season, and and again, you're not going to watch I don't know who could watch every 40 some odd games out there. That would be that would be quite the task. But again, it just fits the season so well. And again, you're still going to get some good matchups out there, interconference matchups when it's all said and done, outside of the playoff games too. So I still think there's a lot of value to it, and particularly for those again. And when we talk about what Charlie Baker's saying, you've got that upper level is going to still get those marquee bowls, but there's still a lot of other people who play college football for the love of the game, and giving them an opportunity to reward them for some travel and some of those other areas are certainly something to be cherished.
Long live the FBS.
And with that, Dr. Loftin, thank you. Jon Heidtke, thank you. Our thanks to Michael Konradi of the Cotton Bowl as well. And for Dalton Hughes, this is another edition of our College Sports Follow the Money, College Sports FTM @gmail.com. If you have questions, we will answer them in a future episode. I'm Andrew Monaco. We thank you so much for joining us.